what is an adventure bike? What's an adventure bike? What's an adventure? Right? You're going to buy an adventure bike, obviously, to do an adventure. What's an adventure? To me, every time I get on my bike, it's an adventure of some kind. That's kind of why I ride. But I've never really kind of felt that my, well, I shouldn't say that. Probably when I was younger, I was defined by my motorcycle. I'm no longer defined by the kind of motorcycle I ride. Not to me, not in my mind. That's what I'm talking about. Not by other people. But you know, when you're young, you define yourself. You define yourself by the kind of bike that you ride. It's not that way for me anymore, I don't think. I mean, I ride what I want to ride, and I ride it where I want to ride. And if at some point I decided to ride on dirt, I would buy a bike that was appropriate for that, but I wouldn't consider myself a dirt rider just because I own a dirt or a dual sport. So, here's a question about your bike. The bike that you ride, a lot of you ride Goldwings, a lot of you ride Harley Davidsons, you know, everybody rides all different kind of bikes. I guess the people who are watching my videos, from what I can see, everybody rides something different. And here's what I want to ask you. Do you define your bike? Or does your bike define you? If you ride an adventure bike, are you an adventure rider? Just a question. And what constitutes an adventure? So if you ride an adventure bike, a bike that's supposedly built for touring the world like a GS, and the only place you ever get to is one state over from where you live, is that an adventure? And are you riding an adventure bike? And let me ask you this. Instead of a GS 1200, if you did it on a Suzuki TU 250 and did the same exact ride, would that make the TU 250 an adventure bike? Just a question. If you're a Goldwing rider, are you definitely a touring rider, or do you just have... Listen, some guys have Goldwings and they just go down and load their wife on the back on the weekend, and they'll drive 30 miles to have some ice cream and take a nice drive home. That's okay, believe me. But does that constitute a touring rider just because you're riding a touring bike? So the question, you can see, the question is, do you define your bike, or does your bike define you? Now, I think there are a lot of cases where the bike defines the rider. They think that just because they ride that kind of bike and they wear those kinds of clothes, that that's who they are as a rider. But maybe none of the other things go along with it. You know, you ride a dual sport, supposedly bikes that can be ridden around the world, and you haven't ridden around the country. And again, I'm not judging you for that. I'm just asking, does that make you an adventure rider just because you own an adventure bike, or do you actually have to go on an adventure? Just a question. Same thing with touring riders. Just because you're riding a touring bike, a Goldwing, if you go to get ice cream on the weekend with your wife on the back and you're riding a Goldwing, does that make you a touring rider? Are you defined by your bike, or do you define your bike? So as I said, if you're riding a TU 250, little Suzuki, around the world, does that become an adventure bike? Do you become an adventure rider? If you take a Harley Davidson around the world, does the Harley Davidson become something other than a cruiser? Does it become an adventure bike? Just by the mere fact of what it's done in its life, does it become an adventure bike? I don't know the answer to this, guys. I'm just asking the question. It really seems that people get tied up in these kind of labels, and frankly, I don't understand it. As I said, every time I get on my motorcycle, it's an adventure, and it doesn't matter which motorcycle I'm on. You know, I've ridden my Intruder 1500 LC down to North Carolina and Tennessee and back. Was that an adventure? It was for me. You know, I had never been on a trip that long before. The extent of my trip had been 3 or 4 days. That's it. So to go away for that length of time on a motorcycle for me was an adventure, and I was riding a big cruiser. How you doing? But I did. But is it considered an adventure bike? No. So this is why, for me, as I say, I define my bikes. My bikes don't define me. It's just the way I feel about it. I'm a rider, period. I'm a motorcyclist, period. That's it. If people want to hone it down a little bit more and be specific and say, okay, this is where I fit in the picture, that's fine with me. That's no problem. I'm a motorcyclist. I'm a rider. Does an adventure have to... Here's another question for you. Does an adventure have to involve dirt? Does it have to involve undeveloped countries? Does it have to involve undeveloped roads? Does it have to involve remote locations? Or is an adventure anything that you make of it? Or is any riding that you do, can you make it an adventure? So here's the thing, okay? You're an adventure rider, you ride an adventure bike. You're a touring rider, you ride a touring bike, if you're going by those labels. So here's my question. What is a cruiser? What is a cruiser? Is that just up and down the street? So does that mean if I want to ride it cross country, it's still not a touring bike? If I throw back, see, that's what I'm saying. To me, your bike is whatever you define your bike, whatever you make of it. If I slap bags and everything else on my Intruder, man, it's a touring bike. And it's an adventure bike. You know, all those things I think are wrapped into one. I don't think you can really separate them. That's just me. That's just my opinion. As Dennis Miller always says, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong.
I'd like to take this opportunity to ask you to like, share, and subscribe my channel. That way you'll get notifications when new videos come out. That's it for this episode of Motorcycle Confessions. Over and out.